Hello, Warhammer 40K players, especially those of you glorious commanders and heroes of the Imperial Guard or the Astra Militarum. This is a very exciting time, and in this video, we're going to be going over some new rules that GW has released for the new Commissar Yarrick model. For those of you who have played in the past in previous editions, you might be familiar with the character and lore of Commissar Yarrick. He was a commissar who fought on Armageddon against the orcs. And he's notably known for being glorious at the Battle of Hades Hive. He's known for a few things. He has his Baelai, and he also has a power claw that he stole from an orc. He cut the orc's arm off and just took his power claw. So he's a very iconic character, and I'm sure we're all excited that he's coming back to be able to be played on tabletop. So in this video, we're going to be going over this article, and then we're going to be going over his data sheet, deep diving his defensive and offensive profiles, as well as his new abilities. So let's start with the article. Commissar Yarrick is back in action, and today we're going to see just what he brings to your Astra Militarum armies on the battlefield. And here they have a beautiful new artwork of Commissar Yarrick with some orcs. That's what he's known for in the lore. He is actually very well respected by Gazkul Magaruk Thraka as one of the Yumis who are more fun to fight because of his bravery and his valor in battle. Despite his advanced age and many near-death injuries, Yarrick is still a keen-minded commander and powerful combatant who effortlessly inspires the soldiers around him. Decades of battle in the most desperate wars imaginable have given him a grasp of tactics few can match, and when leading his guardsmen from the front, now this is important as we'll get later, the Hero of Hades Hive can turn even the rawest of recruits into a razor-sharp fighting force. Now that is cool. And here is his data sheet, which we will go back to very shortly. Yarrick's signature ability lets him choose one of 3 powerful effects each turn, putting him on par with legendary characters like Rope-Booty Gilliman and Abaddon the Despoiler. The first, Counterstrategist, is a fantastic tool for adapting to your opponent's moves as it lets you choose fight or flight depending on the situation. We're particularly fond of having a Cadian heavy weapon squad within 6 inches fire overwatch at a unit that thinks they'll have a crack at Yarrick in close combat, hitting on 4 up if Old Baelai has a platoon bodyguard, only to then have them shoot again with Counterstrategist before their target even gets to declare a charge. To be honest, I don't think that this is a good way to play him, as we'll get to a few better unit choices later, but that's what the article says. Decisive command is ideal when the good commissar is leading from behind a massed mob of infantry or vehicles, as he can spread one of the faction's many powerful orders to a whole group of targets, such as boosting the ballistic skill of a whole squadron of Leman Russ tanks with take aim. He also wouldn't be much of a commissar if he couldn't instill morale in his troops, though being an inspiring hero is enough to ensure his last pistol rarely leaves its holster. And now we have a little bit more artwork. One of Yarrick's most famous abilities is to get back up from certain death, as we recently saw him do for the umpteenth time, and his will of iron is still as strong as ever. This time, it's more likely to activate than before, but it will only bring him back once. He's earned a rest after all. Aside from his outstanding abilities, Old Baelai is no slouch as a fighter either, and has so much practice snipping orcs to bits with his power claw that he hits on a 2-up, better than even a hulking warboss can manage. He can also whip out his formerly ceremonial power sword if quantity is more valuable than quality, and the famed Bale Eye implanted in his skull now burns enemy champions better than ever with double the range, strength, and attacks, and loads more damage than before. Not to mention precision, so he can always target the most valuable foe. You'll get your chance to deploy Commissar Yarrick on your own battlefields very soon. Come back tomorrow to find out just how fast Certified Speed Demon Wazdaka Gutsmech can blaze around the board, and if you're raring to see how the rest of the Imperium's newcomers fare, we'll be showing off their rules later this week. We're sure you can find all sorts of ways to get one over your opponent with this toolkit of an ability, and that's referring to Counterstrategist. And don't worry, old school Commissariat fans, Commissar Graves, that's another model, shoots enough for the both of them. And that's referring to Decisive Command. So that's what the article has about Commissar Yarrick, and we're going to go on to my commentary, and we're going to go over the data sheets first. So first of all, he has a 6-inch move, which is pretty standard for infantry in the Astra Militarum. He has toughness 4, which is higher than other officers and infantry units. That is a Space Marine toughness, so he's quite tough. His save is base 4 up with a 4 up invul save. And as we all know, 4 up invulnerable saves are quite durable. On average, they block half the incoming attacks, and you can also CP reroll it reliably. He has 5 wounds, a 6 up leadership, which is typical for a commissar, and 1 OC. So one of his abilities, which I'm going to get to because it's very relevant in his durability, is the Will of Iron. The first time this model is destroyed, remove it from play, then at the end of the phase, roll 1d6. On a 2-up, set this model back up on the battlefield as close as possible to where it was destroyed and not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units with 3 wounds remaining. So looking at his defensive profile, he is extremely durable for an infantry officer. Now, you probably won't be running him solo, but having toughness 4 with 5 wounds means that most snipers will not be able to destroy him in one activation. The opponent will need several snipers, and due to his invulnerable save, they're going to need a lot of shots. They might need at least 4 shots to kill Commissar Yarrick, and on a 2-up, he might even come back with 3 wounds remaining. And so if you want to actually get rid of Commissar Yarrick, you might need to fire 6 sniper shots at him that do at least 3 damage. And that makes him extremely durable. Now, if you wanted to make him a little bit more durable, you could include him in a unit with a command squad with an Ogren bodyguard or Nork dead dog, so that now he also has 4-up feel no pain. So Commissar Yarrick is immune to most precision in the game. And reasonably, the best way to take him out is to clear his entire squad, his whole bodyguard unit, his command squad, and him, and then kill him again. So he is very durable. Now, one issue is that he can die twice in one turn. So if the opponent has assassinate as a fixed objective, for example, then they can score assassinate twice. If they have no prisoners in their turn and they wipe the squad and kill Commissar Yarrick, and then he gets back up and they kill him again, they could max out no prisoners very easily just by taking out his squad. So that is one downside to abilities that make you get up again. But he is very durable and difficult to kill. So now we're going to look at his weaponry. He has the Bale Eye, which is a precision weapon with a 12-inch range, 2 attacks, 2 up ballistic skill, 6 strength, -2 AP, and damage is D3 plus 1. So it is swingy, but it is a minimum of 2 damage up to 4 damage with an average of 3 damage. So it is reasonably a good weapon at taking out Marines. Of course, if you have a bodyguard unit. And if you can add buffs to make him shoot better, then it is actually quite relevant. And as a precision weapon with 2 shots, hitting with a ballistic skill of 2 up with a reasonable save, he might be able to take out enemies that have 4 wounds. If you do bring Gaunt's Ghosts, Rattling Snipers, or maybe Kazarkin or Aquilons with sniper rifles, then you might be able to easily precision an opponent's leader out. And this is very relevant when the opponent is running, let's say, a Technomancer with a group of Wraiths, or they're playing Orcs and they have a little bit more durable leader, or one of the units that will probably be a big threat to Commissar Yarrick and his squad would be Drukhari Witches, led by Lelith Hesperax. So if you can precision out Lelith Hesperax, it might be useful. And then he has a last pistol, 12-inch range, 1 attack, 2 up ballistic skill, 301. A typical last pistol, but with a better ballistic skill. You might not be using this as much. And then he has a storm bolter. So he actually has a heavy weapon on him. And it has rapid fire 2, 24-inch range, 2 attacks, so up to 4 attacks if you're within 12 inches. 2 up ballistic skill, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. So a typical storm bolter. But it's very interesting to have a storm bolter on an infantry officer. It will add a lot of volume, and if you have ways to increase AP with a Lehman Russ Exterminator, for example, or maybe Fields of Fire, then it could actually end up doing a little bit of damage. His melee is very good. His Power Claw has 4 attacks, 2 up weapon skill, 8 strength, -2 AP, and 2 damage. So it's pretty good for attacking Marine profiles. But a lot of opponents now have -1 to damage. So things against Catan or maybe an Armiger that's bonded by a Knight Defender will block off a lot of these Power Claw attacks. He also has a Power Sword, 6 attacks, 2 up weapon skill, strength 4, AP -2, 1 damage. This is good against chaff. So you're still wounding things like Ripper Swarms and Gretchen on 2s. So it is still reasonably good at clearing some of the chaff, and it does have 6 attacks. So the Power Sword, you're probably not going to be using it as much, but there are some niche cases where you might choose to use the Power Sword instead of the Power Claw. Now, his other ability, other than the one that lets him get up on death, is Hero of Hades Hive. In your command phase, you can select one of the abilities in the Hero of Hades Hive section on the next page. Until the start of your next command phase, this model has that ability. So he has 3 different abilities in the Hero of Hades Hive section. The first one is Counterstrategist. At the end of your opponent's movement phase, you can select one enemy unit that was set up or ended a move within 12 inches of this model's unit, and one friendly regiment unit within 6 inches of and visible to this model. That regiment unit can then either make a normal move of up to d6 inches, shoot at that enemy unit, but only if it is an eligible target, declare a charge against that enemy unit, but only if it is within 12 inches of that regiment unit. Note that even if this charge is successful, the charging unit does not receive any charge bonus this turn. Now, the charge bonus, for those of you who are newer, is applying just to the fights first. So, Lance abilities and the Catachan Jungle Fighters +1 to wound when they charge, that still applies. So consider that in your list building. His decisive command ability says the next order issued by this model can be issued to one eligible friendly unit within 12 inches of this model. So normally you can order within 6 inches, but he can order within 12 inches with this ability. And if this is a first order issued by a unit from your army this phase, that order affects not only that eligible unit, but every other eligible friendly unit within 6 inches of that eligible unit. So at the start of the game, when your army is bunched up, you might want to use Decisive Command and use Commissar Yarrick to order maybe half your army. If you have a big tank like a Rogaldorn commander, maybe you select to order him and order 2 or 3 other units around the Rogaldorn commander. And then the Rogaldorn commander can use his orders to order some tanks that are further away. So that will definitely help your order economy, and having a 12-inch order is pretty good. So in games where it's fewer points, like 1,000 point games or maybe 1,500 point games that some people will see in some local crusade or some local tournaments, this might be useful to help on your order economy. His last ability is Inspiring Hero. It's an aura. While a friendly Astra Militarum unit is within 6 inches of this model, you can reroll Battle Shock and Leadership tests taken for that unit. Now, this is important because it is an Astra Militarum unit. So you can use this on abhumans that normally don't take abilities from a lot of the abilities in the game that are keyword focused. This applies to Baneblades. So it's really good that it's an Astra Militarum unit. Now we're going to go to his orders and who he can lead. This officer can issue up to 2 orders to regiment, squadron, or Titanic units. Now this is really cool. Since there's a Titanic keyword there, it shows that GW might be pushing people to try the Baneblade again. In the past, Baneblades were not considered that good, mainly because of their size, but also because it was difficult to order them. Originally, Lord Solar Leontus could order anything with the Astra Militarum keyword, but he lost that, and then they gave it back to him. Well, they gave the Titanic keyword back to him. So that's actually cool. You could use Commissar Yarrick instead of Lord Solar Leontus in a Baneblade list. And one of the best parts about his datasheet is that he can be attached to Cadians, Catachans, Death Corps, Kazarkin, Tree Combat Engineers, and Tempesta Scions. So, in my opinion, this is what Lord Marshal Dreher should have been. The ability for Commissar Yarrick to have flexible orders and be attached to a lot of different units. This allows him to essentially be your main commander. So he is nearly on par with Lord Solar Leontus when it comes to his defensive and offensive profiles. Arguably, he's probably better than Lord Solar Leontus. Yes, Lord Solar Leontus does have 8 wounds and a better base save, but Commissar Yarrick, he does get up on death like Lord Marshal Dreher, and he is durable enough. And his range shooting and his melee attacks, they're quite significant. And while he's not going to be one-shotting enemy units like the Primarchs that the article mentioned, he's definitely going to be able to skirmish later on in the game against enemy action units that may have survived. So he's good at mopping up enemy units that might be on a couple wounds. So even against a knight, something with high toughness, he could skirmish and roll a lot of dice to see if he could take the last few wounds off. So he definitely is very relevant in the game, and I'm expecting him to be around 100 points because Ursula Creed is 85 currently. Lord Solar Leontus is 130 currently. And Lord Marshal Dreer is 100. So I'm expecting Commissar Yarrick to be around 100. So he definitely is going to be contender for that main leader spot. And one thing I want to talk about is his orders. In Grizzled Company, he can give an extra order. So if Grizzled Company is staying for 11th edition, then he will be able to issue up to 3 orders to regiment, squadron, or Titanic units, which is great. And if you use the snap to it stratagem, he can give another order of that type at the start of any phase. So you could run a full Baneblade list with just Commissar Yarrick, and his ability makes his ordering a lot better, his decisive command ability. So, as I mentioned before, in low point games, you might be able to run Commissar Yarrick with some more expensive models because he doesn't necessarily need to run a command squad. He does give an order within 12 inches, and it shouldn't be hard to stay within 12 inches. So that could save you points from having to take a command squad in low points games. And this is more from a fun and casual standpoint because if you're playing in a 2K competitive game, I think you probably should run him with a command squad. And me personally, I think you should be running him with an Ogren bodyguard or a Nork dead dog. And the reason why is because of his abilities. So he can countercharge and he can counter shoot. So having the extra Ripper gun, it might help in your counter shooting. And when you're charging Nork Dead Dog in the fight phase, he does do mortal wounds. So I'm thinking that's one of the ways you could play him. And while Power Claw at strength 8, it does kill Marines on a 2 up, but when you're attacking tougher targets, even transports that are toughness 9, it might not be very reliable for doing a lot of damage. But if you run him with Catachans, now it gives a whole unit +1 to wound, so his Power Claw could be a lot more relevant there. So while you don't necessarily need to run him with a command squad or a bodyguard unit, I definitely would run him with a command squad and a bodyguard unit because that 24-inch range is pretty good, and the command squad does have the medics to bring the bodyguard unit back. So while he is durable, I think you should still play him with a command blob. Now, the Counterstrategist ability is his best ability if you can play him properly. And I can already see that Commissar Yarrick might have a higher learning curve because he does have a lot of range restrictions. So you do need to keep that in mind in your movement phase if you want to use his abilities. And his positioning is going to be very important as well due to the short range on his abilities. So on his counter strategist ability, a friendly regiment unit has to be within 6 inches of and visible to Commissar Yarrick. And so he's definitely a frontline commander. He's not going to be sitting in the back screening. He's going to be a lot closer to the front line. He's definitely going to be outside his deployment zone to make the best use of the counter strategist ability. But I think that the reactive move on a regiment unit is great for screening. You can have Catachan scout out and stage behind a wall, and if the opponent comes close enough, then you can have the Catachans reactive move out of the wall to screen Yarrick's blob or a tank, or you could use them to add OC onto an objective you couldn't reach normally. So maybe you walk close to an objective that the opponent doesn't have. Once the opponent gets onto that objective, if they're within 12 inches, then Commissar Yarrick can use his counter strategist normal move ability to move the units the last couple of inches onto that objective. So that might help deny the enemy from scoring cleanse, for example, because you have to control the objective to score cleanse. So if you can reactive move more OC onto an objective that the opponent gets on, you could prevent them from scoring cleanse. Or if they're trying to score area denial, you can have them screen out. So reactive move forward and prevent them from getting within range to score area denial. So there are a lot of different ways to play reactive moves, and they're always great to have because movement wins games. Now, we're going to talk about the second ability, shooting at the enemy unit. So, like the article said, this could give you a double Overwatch essentially, and this is what made the Quester Forge Pack detachment in Knights amazing because the Knights could Thronegeist and Overwatch. And so while this ability is not Overwatch, it's actually better because you can use this against fire dragons and scourges and other units and armies that can turn off Overwatch. So the Eldar can turn off Overwatch, and they typically use it so that you can't Overwatch fire dragons when they disembark. Well, guess what? Counterstrategist is not Overwatch, so you can use it to shoot at units you normally could not have Overwatch. So this is an extremely strong ability, and it just shuts down a lot of armies that the enemy might have. That's a benefit to it, but you can also double Overwatch. So let's say you have Scions on foot, and they're watching an objective, but not inside of the objective. If you look at some of the released 11th edition terrain and objectives, there are holes in the objective. And what I mean by that is there's a gap where you can pretty much stage 15 scions on foot, 15 scions and an Ogren bodyguard or Nork Dead Dog right behind the ruin so that it blocks line of sight. When the opponent enters the ruin, you can overwatch with the scions. And if you don't clear out the enemy squad, you can use the Counterstrategist or vice versa. You'd probably want to use Counterstrategist first to save your CP and then Overwatch. Or let's say you have two units that the opponent has. So they have some redundancy. So they put one unit into the terrain feature to capture the objective. Now the Scions can use Counterstrategist. If Yarrick is close enough, the Scions can use Counterstrategist to fire on the enemy unit. Maybe they'll wipe that unit because they have sustained, and maybe they have first rank fire, second rank fire from the turn before. And then the opponent really needs to score that objective. So they put another unit in there. Then the Scions can overwatch them. So Commissar Yarrick can be a great piece for area denial. So he's good for screening, but he's also good for area denial now. So next, you can declare a charge against the enemy unit. Now, this is amazing, like I said before, because you can use it with Rough Riders and Death Riders that get Lance on the charge. You can use it with Catachans that get +1 to wound if you charge or if you are charged. And so it's essentially a free heroic intervention or a surge move in your movement phase. So while Commissar Yarrick, unlike Lord Solar Leontus or Ursula Creed, while he doesn't help your CP economy, his abilities are very similar to some of the core stratagems. And so he could save you CP in that way. So while he doesn't give you bonus CP or reduce stratagem CP cost, his abilities are actually better because they can save you CP or you could double up on some stratagems. So the way I see you using that charge ability is you might be able to use it on Yarrick's unit if you run Nork Dead Dog and a guy with a Power Fist in your command squad. So you could just charge a enemy unit. So let's say they're playing Tau and they have a bunch of Pathfinders and they go first. So the Pathfinders infiltrate, and let's say they're trying to scout block you or something, and they're within 9 inches of the deployment, and it comes to their movement phase. Now, Commissar Yarrick can use his squad to charge the Pathfinders in their movement phase and destroy them before they even get to shoot. So this is very nice. Now, I don't recommend that you do this early on in the game, but if the opponent messes up their infiltrate, or later on in the game, maybe they have a unit that doesn't have very strong melee. Maybe it's a guard unit of Death Corps, 10 Death Corps guys. You could use Commissar Yorick and Catachans with a Catachan command squad and Nork Dead Dog to just charge them in the movement phase if they come forward to score an objective or something. And you could deny them. And you could destroy units in the opponent's turn for free because it's an ability, not a stratagem. So this is actually great to use on Yarick's unit if the enemy messes up or later on in the game. Maybe you could even use this to get extra movement. So let's say Yarick's unit is standing out in the open because of the way things happen, and you want to get into terrain feature to get cover. Maybe an opponent is within that terrain. He ends his movement within that terrain feature, and it happens to be within 12 inches of Commissar Yarrick. Now you can just use your guys to charge into that ruin so you don't get shot in the enemy turn. That's a way to get extra movement as well. Now, another way that this is good is that it's great for tying up enemy units in their movement phase to give -1 to hit to an engaged enemy. So let's say an opponent pushes a tank up and they want to get within multi-melta range to shoot at your tank. Maybe you want to charge a bunch of chaff into that enemy tank in their movement phase so that now the opponent has to fire out of combat with a -1 to hit penalty from Big Guns Never Tire. So that's one of the ways it could be helpful in denying enemy some damage. Or if the enemy is playing a melee pressure army like World Eater, Blood Angels, or Space Wolves, and they want to, say, charge a Rogel Dorn commander, you could use Commissar Yarrick's ability to send some Catachan or any battle line infantry at them. And the World Eaters, they'll just chew up that battle line unit, but they won't be able to charge into the tank that you want to save. So you can use some small chaff units, some MSU style units, to pretty much tie up an enemy and frustrate them from charging one of your more essential units that you're going to need to do damage later in the game, you know? So that's a great way to use that ability as well. So from his abilities, it seems like he should be running a more combined arms style list. And what I mean is tanks and infantry, and not using him in a skew list. So like earlier, I mentioned, yes, you could run him with a bunch of Bane Blades, but I don't think that that would be the most effective way to play him. I would definitely run him with, couple Rogel Dorns. Maybe you don't even need Rogel Dorn commanders because he gives squadron orders. Maybe you could run a regular Dorn with a Rogel Dorn commander. Kind of like how some people run Lord Solar or Leontus. You could run regular Dorns with him and give them orders. But I think that you should be running a combined arms list with a mix of infantry and tanks. That way you could use your infantry, like I said above, to help screen your tanks. So how I think he should be run is he should probably run with a bodyguard unit. Personally, I'm a big fan of Catachan, so you've probably heard me say this many times, but I would run him with full Catachan blob with an Ogren bodyguard or Nork Dead Dog, and I would probably run a big blob of Scions on foot. That way they have a strong overwatch. Or maybe you don't want to run Scions. The reason why I recommend the Catachan Command Squad with the Catachans is that the Catachans have two flamers. The Catachan Command Squad has the option to take a heavy flamer. So if you don't want to use Scions, you can just use Commissar Yarrick's blob by itself to stage behind the ruin and double overwatch whatever comes in. Now, this might not work against knights. So scions would probably be better at overwatching things like armigers that come in to take a ruin. But that is an option, taking a bunch of flamers with Commissar Yarrick. And the great thing about it is that it also denies deep strike as well, because it doesn't deny deep strike. Sure, the opponent can deep strike, but let's say they deep strike a bunch of Aquilons nearby. So they 6-inch deep strike a bunch of Aquilons. Why would they do that? I don't know, but you could double overwatch the Aquilons essentially, and you could just wipe that unit, and the opponent lost 100 points on their turn. So it is a good way to have that board control. Even just Commissar Yarrick's blob himself, but personally, I think that a 15-man blob of Scions near Commissar Yarrick starting on foot would be a good way to play him. And so you have his command blob, you have the big Scion command blob, and then you have a few tanks around him. So the great thing about the decisive commando order or the ability is that he can order his own unit. Let's say move, move, move. And he has that Scion squad on foot. They also get move, move, move because they are within 6 inches. So it always, these abilities always work on his own unit as well. So that's why I would definitely be running him with a big blob. Not by big blob, I don't necessarily mean 20 infantry guys. I mean a blob of 10 guys at least with a command blob and some kind of ogren. That way he can maximize the use of his abilities. So if you're using him with an ogren bodyguard and the Catachan squad and you're overwatching, now you got a heavy flamer, now you got a ripper gun, you got two regular flamers, maybe you got a couple other special weapons as well. Maybe you don't take the flag guy, you just take the medic, maybe the Voxcaster, maybe you don't take the Voxcaster and take extra special weapons. So now you have quite a volume of fire that you can use. So definitely his own blob is going to be very, very strong. And since he's playing the front line, his blob is going to be quite a threat to the opponent. So the great thing about Decisive Command is that you get a better order range. So in Grizzled Company, there's an enhancement you can take for 10 points, Loud Hailer, that allows one of your officers to give a 12-inch order. So Commissar Yorick, with his ability, he already has that. So imagine you saving 10 points because you have bonus order range. And the bonus orders also let you run him with less officer tax. So one of the things that a lot of Astra Militarum players had a gripe with is the officer tax. You have to pay a lot of points for orders. So a Rogaldorn is 260 points currently. The Rogaldorn tank commander is 290 points. It's 30 points to get your squadron orders. Lord Solar Leontus, he's 130 points to get 4 orders in Grizzled Company. And he's not particularly good, like in terms of durability and damage dealing for 130 points. So most of those 130 points is going to the orders. And so let's say you have Ursula Creed, that's 85 points. She costs 30 more points than Acadian Castellan, and she has 3 orders, up to 4 orders in Grizzled Company. So you're paying a lot for your officers that are not that durable compared to other factions leaders. And a lot of people had a gripe with that. Me personally, I don't have a gripe with that. I do like the Rogaldorn commander's ability for rerolls. It allows him to be a lot more reliable in his shooting phase. So I actually like his ability, so it's not just the orders I'm taking him for. And I do like Lord Solar Leontus. I play Gonskos and Ratlings, so being able to infiltrate block the no man's land nearly completely and then being able to put them back into reserves to come down later, for example, that's something I can do with Lord Solar Leontus. So I actually do like their abilities. So, but some people, they just take leaders for their orders, I guess. And finally, a discussion on inspiring hero. I think that When you look at it, it's not a very good ability and you're not going to be using it very often, but it might be applicable in rare situations where you already used Insane Bravery and you need a centerpiece unit like a Baneblade or a Rogaldorn Commander to pass Battle Shock really badly. So I've had a few games where I didn't use Insane Bravery and my tank got Battle Shocked and I couldn't get take aim and I also lost access to stratagems. So that means I can't tank shock with them. And since they're battle shocked, if they have to fall back, so let's say in Hammer of the Emperor, you can fall back and shoot with a stratagem, you wouldn't be able to use that. And if you wanted to fall back to allow another unit to shoot at the opponent that you're currently tied into combat with, then you'd have to take a desperate escape test because you're battle shocked. And so there are a lot of problems from your tank becoming battle shocked. And also, the Baneblade has 8 OC, the Rogaldorn Commander has 5 OC, and if you use the enhancement, which nobody does, you can make him have 8 OC as well. So you're losing a lot of objective control. So that might affect your primary scoring. If you're battle shocked, you can't do actions. So let's say you really needed to perform an action to win the game on turn 5, but you're battle shocked. Now you've lost the game. It is rare, like I said, it is very rare, but there are situations where you really need the extra 2 points and you really can't battle shock. And so if you already used Insane Bravery earlier in the game and you need to pass battle shock, then maybe you choose Inspiring Hero, right? Like I said, let's say it's the final round, you're going second, and there's no chance for the opponent to have another movement phase where you can use Counterstrategist, right? Maybe you don't have that many units left to use Decisive Command. You might just use Inspiring Hero to help yourself pass Battle Shock. Now, think about this. Yarrick is a Commissar, so he has 6 up leadership already. With Duty and Honor, you can get your unit to 5 up leadership. And with rerolls on Battle Shock, it is very likely to pass. In Grizzled Company, you can always use Duty and Honor and spend 1 CP to order swap to take aim, for example. So if you give Commissar Yorick Inspiring Hero, it might help later on in the game. So that's the only use that I see. And if you have any other uses that you see, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And like I read in the article and mentioned before, his abilities definitely make it seem like he's a frontline commander and not for staying back and screening the back line with the Master Vox, like a lot of people are playing Lord Solar and Ursula Creed. They're usually staying a little further back, but Commissar Yarrick, it looks like he needs to be very close to the front line. So whatever units he wants to use Counter Strategist on, he needs to be just 6 inches behind. And so definitely you're going to need something else in the back line. So if the enemy's playing Grey Knights or something else that has uppy downy, maybe they have a Calidus Assassin or Gaunt's Ghosts, they have maybe Marine Scouts that they can uppy downy. Maybe they're playing Demonic Incursion and they can uppy downy demons, and you really need your home objective screened because you're playing, let's say, Scorched Earth or you're playing Linchpin and it's very important. Maybe it's not bad to run another command blob in the back, or maybe some 10 Cadians or indirect units like a field ordnance battery to screen your home. So indirect units, they might not be good in 11th edition because of hidden rules. We don't know too much yet, but indirect might not be good. So you might want to run something else. So on GW, I don't know how the terrain layouts are all going to be, but currently on GW terrain layout 2, you might be able to screen the backline and still have some units that can shoot and stay relevant in the game. So we'll see how 11th edition turns out, but if you're running Commissar Yarrick, he's a frontline commander, and if you need to screen your backline, you definitely need other units to do that. So That's another list building choice that might come up in the foreseeable future. And overall, I think that Commissar Yarrick is a top tier unit. He's one of Astra Militarum's best officers. And personally, I think that he's going to become an auto include in many lists. I have seen some of the 11th edition maps and terrain layouts, and I'm starting to do some map markups. You might see that in the upcoming days. And I definitely think that Commissar Yarrick will definitely have play. And if I do play him, I'm playing him with Catachans. I hope Grizzled Company sticks around for 11th edition because I really like the theme of it and I really like what you can do and how you can play your army. So I really hope that it sticks around so I can run Commissar Yarick with Catachans and just use a stratagem to sticky objectives with him. So thank you all for watching, and I hope that you guys are just as excited as I am to run Commissar Yarick in your list. And if I do play more casual with 1,000 points, maybe, I think that I will be playing him with a Baneblade. I might be playing him solo just for fun.